Let's talk about interviews. It's a huge part of the job search and getting the actual offer. And a lot of people kind of skip interview research in favor of like, yeah, I know all about me. I can talk on all these different points about what I've worked on, but then they get kind of flustered or stumped when certain things are asked of them and they don't know enough about the company that they're interviewing with. Often we have this like, I know I can do this job. I'm not going to spend the time to understand exactly what you guys do. So within the interview process, there's the pre-interview, there's the interview, and there's the post-interview. Let's focus in on the pre-interview activities. This is honestly most of everybody's like least favorite part because we know we can do the work. It's just, yeah, we didn't learn about the company before we're sitting in front of somebody who breathes, sleeps, and eats that company. So there's a lot of different ways that we could spend hours doing interview prep. There's a great summary, and I love this guy's stuff. Follow this guy. He's a HR professional slash recruiter, and I think he's got a lot of really good advice. But he gives a rundown of 15 minutes of prep where you're basically checking out the company website, social media, you're looking up the interviewer, and maybe even watch a video on the company on YouTube if you can find it. This really helps. I can't tell you how many people I have sat across from as the interviewer who have no idea what the company does. And I refuse to kind of ask that question in most interviews unless it's for a more senior role because yeah, most people just don't take the time. They're like, dude, I need a job. I don't really care what you guys do. I can do the work. Just give me the job, which is from the other side, not at all what somebody's looking for when they're hiring. So, some really basic job interview prep. Do a very basic Google search in order to get the basic company info. There's obviously a little bit of digging when it comes to understanding the dynamics of the team and the interviewer that you're potentially talking to so that you can be relatable and talk about things that they clearly have experienced and know about. It's going over the website, it's looking through the product, signing up for the product, which I do every time that I go in for any type of interview. It's looking through social media to see either what kind of campaigns they're doing or what they're talking about to the public so that you know exactly what they talk about on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes it really helps to look through reviews as well to see what people are saying about using their product or service. And you can even go through Glassdoor, and I'll cover a little bit of that later. I've created an audit checklist and used a couple of different tools that anybody can pick up and use where you're able to find out about the company. Some really basic stuff is how to pronounce the company name, especially when it's a unique one. People have this really visceral reaction because, again, they're in this every single day. They're like, how do you not know how to pronounce our name? And it's like, well, dude, I don't work there. Like, it's not my jam. Understand what they sell and what they do, really basic stuff. Some really basic understanding of the company history, meaning like if you can go into an about section on the website, it gives you a pretty clear understanding in terms of context of how this idea came about. This is especially important if you're ever interviewing with startups. Understanding the business model. If it is a B2B, B2C, if it is a monthly subscription, if it's a one time purchase, all of that really matters when they're asking you questions that are specific about their company. Who are their competitors? I have a number of competitor tools that you can instantly look up and find competitors. I've also created a ton of prompts that allow you to instantly find competitors. So you're able to look at their competitors and say, well, these guys do this, that, and the other thing. Why aren't you guys doing that? And that often creates some pause, and they're like, wow, you've done your fucking research. What's up, dude? It really does help. I think there's a lot of interesting ways that you can look at recent news and different developments about the company. From the standpoint of looking into the interviewer that you're speaking to, looking at their professional background, i.e. LinkedIn, does save a lot of time, and it does allow you to understand, again, what to talk about in the interview. If you're talking about very specific stuff, and they're just a recruiter, they're not going to understand any of the jargon that you're using, and it's probably a giant waste of time. If they've only been at the company for 3 months, then there's a high likelihood that they don't have a full overview of everything that goes on at the company. Whereas if they've been there for 10 years, They probably know everything inside and out and all the employees. Not that you're meant to know these things, but yeah, it's important. Department size. If you're working at a company of 30, 40, 50 people, it's a much smaller understanding of how things work. You're going to wear lots of different hats, and that should give you an understanding of the company culture as well. I do recommend looking up companies on Glassdoor. Of course, the people that write on Glassdoor are super jaded, and like that's only where people go to trash companies for the most part, and then companies go on to write a bunch of fake reviews. It is what it is. From the website perspective, I go through everything. So I look at the homepage, I look at the pricing, I always look at the team/about page. If they have company mission and value stuff, I try to speak to those values on a fairly regular basis within the job interview. The job description, if you're not mentioning the specifics that they're looking for in terms of the requirements of your experience, and on top of that, what you'll do in the job, there sometimes is a misunderstanding where it's like, yeah, I can do all that stuff. That's a given. They don't know that. I often will look at the blog to understand, like, do they know how to write blogs, but also from the standpoint of like, what is it that they think they need to talk about to the world, and product features. So the stuff that is what they're building is really, really important for you to know inside and out. It doesn't need to be an hour-long endeavor. Honestly, a good 5 minutes, 2 minutes, you could get a pretty good understanding of exactly what they do. From the standpoint of signing up, again, I always do this whenever possible. And if there is a product roadmap to understand what future either developments or features or integrations are on the horizon, like that's really interesting for you to talk about with somebody that's higher up in the organization. From the standpoint of any type of social media, I always look at the company profiles to see, one, do they exist? And two, like if there's anything on YouTube, what's there? So like there's usually an explainer video, but there's often some type of either webinar or some type of media, some type of recording of keynote speeches, that kind of stuff. And if they have community channels, this is more of a blockchain thing, then checking out those and seeing what people are saying and interacting with. The last thing I've already mentioned is product reviews. I think all of this is super powerful and can be used within the interview process and when you're conversing back and forth with people to show that you've done your research, you're taking this seriously, and you're really into what they do. From the standpoint of tools on where and how to look this stuff up, company research, I've created this like super long prompt that would allow you to basically just put in the company and then do a quick bit of research. I think there's an interesting tool that allows you to look at via AI, their content and what they have on their website to determine what areas they focus on. So those are great talking points for you. If you're looking for competitors, I would recommend using an AI tool that allows you to basically plug in a prompt and then basically ask like who are their top 10 competitors. Those don't always work, so you have to guess and check. And often when it spits out results, it makes them up. So I will go back in and I will include my competitor prompt so that you know how to plug that in. On the off chance that you're not into doing that, that's fine. There are many different tools that allow you to do that. I would say the SEO tools, given that I consider myself an SEO expert, it really helps to really take a quick glance at like what a company is looking like with the digital footprint to see like, wow, you guys have like zero organic traffic, or looks like you're spending a ton of money on ads in order to supplement what doesn't happen organically. And that might be very specific to somebody that's going into marketing roles, but it absolutely does help. From a recruitment standpoint, if you do not have any questions within a job interview, especially within HR, like the first recruiter that you speak to, they're going to think that you're not interested, which is usually far from the case. It's how people work. If you don't ask me anything about myself, about my company, about what I do, what we do, what we're building, they assume that you're just not there for any reason. So I've assembled a massive list of questions that you can approach from different angles. And I just want to quickly show what that looks like. They're categorized by the question type, and they break down into these different areas. So these are the questions and why you should be asking them. And I, again, have broken them down by different category or segment, and just have a couple of these chambered or off to the side or in a different window. So when they're like, do you have any questions for me? You have a moment of being like, well, yeah, of course. Like, how much time do you have? And then rapid fire a couple of these questions. It shows that you're really considering a lot when going into these roles. What are the company's goals for the next few years can be a question for anyone at any company during any job interview. And if they don't handle them well, then pivot and jump into another one that's more specific to the product. I mean, honestly, I think some of the last questions are my favorite stuff. So I've seen a number of examples where people are like, dude, ask them specifically at the end of the interview, after you've asked one or two kind of normal questions, do you have any hesitations about hiring me for this role? Compared to other candidates, do you see yourself going with me? I love what you guys are up to. One of the things that I think often happens is we kind of prattle on. I just did that. So sometimes ask questions and then shut the fuck up. It's really hard to do that, especially if you've never been in a sales environment. It's so important to let people answer these questions without jumping in out of excitement or whatever the case is. A few other elements just to be aware that I've created and added into this sheet is the interview format. Usually you do a welcome/intro where they introduce themselves, but even before that, you do like a little silly dance of, oh, where you calling from? What's the weather like? Blah, 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 blah. That kind of thing. It needs to be there. I don't think it brings any value, but it really does need to be there. It's small talk. Europeans, not great at small talk. Americans, that's, that's what we live for. I don't get it. Usually there'll be a quick company overview, an explanation of the role, an understanding of your background, and then some type of understanding of like, cool, what are your skills and do they align with what we're trying to do? They might ask a couple of questions to determine whether or not you're a culture fit. They'll ask you if you have any questions, and then there's kind of a wrap up of what next steps are supposed to be. A couple of other things that I just wanted to provide for people is there are tons of online resources for interview questions. So I provided that here. Like, go for it, go nuts, review. And then there's tons of guides online for tips. And I just figured, why not give that to people to check out if they want to. A couple of quick common sense things just before your video call or your first interview that's going to be more than likely a Zoom or a Google Meet call. I just need to mention this because I would feel some remorse if I didn't. So close out all unnecessary tabs except for what you need, and I'll show you what I have open in just a second. Then make sure that you're recording on a laptop, not a mobile device, because in the off chance they're like, hey, can you show me something like that? And it's like, I'm on my phone. And then it's like, okay, well, I guess maybe next time. Make sure you're in a quiet location, no cafes with loud banging or anything like that. Make sure that you can use your camera. Like, it's weird to interview with people that have a camera off. Don't use iPods or AirPods. Jesus. It's a really crazy thing that, yeah, those things don't pick up like any audio. It's super frustrating. Silence your phone and notifications. I've seen a lot of personal stuff come up when people are sharing their screen, and it's also super distracting. Load the meeting interface before you get on the call. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in to do a Zoom call, and it's like, oh, you got to do a software update, and it's like, I gave myself 30 seconds to get into this thing. It's just frustrating, and it throws you off balance for the rest of the call. I get dry mouth when I do lots and lots of talking, so I always have water nearby. And the last thing that should be common sense is just making sure that everybody knows, like, within your household, maybe it's roommates, maybe it's something else, like, hey, I have a really important call. Please do not come in. I'm doing something important here. I love this video down at the bottom. It's a guy who's giving a whole talk on CNN, and then his kid comes in, and then his other kid comes in, and his wife has to like come grab him and pull him out. It's a whole crazy thing. It's like a minute and a half video, but it's absolutely hilarious. I'm sure you can look up CNN interviewed kid comes into the room. Take a look. It's fantastic. Inside of the resource that has all of the interview questions, I've added a few tabs with some goodies. So I've already shown the guides. I think it's really powerful to have a number of tabs open that you can immediately pull and start referencing. So company website, just in case I need to access something specific they're talking about. Job description, so that I can align my responses directly with either the skills they're asking about or specific projects that they want out of the requirements section. I often pull up the interviewer's LinkedIn so that I'm able to check them out and, of course, reference different things from their background. The company LinkedIn, on occasion, I'll have in a separate tab, but it's not necessary. Again, this is what I do, but if this is overwhelming for you, you don't have to. Any additional company resources that you want to reference on the call or you think are interesting, why not have it there on the off chance it comes up for a question? I will often have my resume and or LinkedIn open, sometimes my portfolio. I'm often sending these things over in the chat when they're asking about like, oh, have you done any public speaking? It's like, boom, right there. I'll usually have a doc that contains my company research and any notes that I took in my research process. That often includes the questions, but sometimes maybe the questions make sense to be in a different tab. I often also bring a presentation resource. I was having coffee with an old friend the other day, and he was telling me that he went through a number of interviews, and people were wowed by him bringing basically, here's his go to market strategy, or here's a number of presentations that he's already done, and he walked them through that. I do the same thing with my playbooks, and people are like, holy smokes, like, you had all this on hand? I'm like, yeah, dude, I know what I'm doing. It doesn't take a lot of work to throw a few things into a presentation where people sit back and they're like, this person is super prepared. So that can come in the flavor of creating this competitor list. That can come in the flavor of just a couple of simple slides as to how you would approach. And the great thing about having AI at your fingertips is you can generate this stuff super fast. I've already gone over the 5 minutes before checklist, but I do want to leave you with, before we're done with this module, how I create real quick competitor lists. I want to lay this one in here. It's worth mentioning that there are lots of scams and fake jobs out there. I think it's important to understand what you're getting into and know before you're inside of these conversations what to look for. So if they're missing a company website, if they're missing a company LinkedIn profile, whether it's the interviewer or the company itself, I think any required third-party download that you need to install in order to have a video interview is a huge red flag. And there are lots of scams that are meant to get access to either your crypto keys or your laptop to put malware on your device. Avoid that like the plague. A very simple Google search will expose what that is. Also, looking at negative reviews on Glassdoor to understand what have some of the burnt employees said about the company, I think it is helpful to know before going in. I have used so many different video call tools out there. The standard is Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Zoom, sometimes Telegram for blockchain and crypto companies. That's about it. Anything else, probably pretty shady, and you can always look it up. In terms of what's happening during and even after the call, if you're showing up and this person that you're interviewing with has the camera off, it doesn't mean it's absolutely a scam, but my feelers go out and I'm like, this doesn't feel like the real deal. If it's a group interview where you're sitting amongst 5, 10, 20 other candidates, it's probably not the real deal and it's probably a scam. 100% commission roles, they are real jobs, but man, it's a grind. And I would try to avoid that because you're going to burn up a ton of time for very little in the way of money. Multi-level marketing scams are so common these days where essentially you have to pay for something up front in order to then start selling the product on your own. Don't waste your time with that stuff. Any upfront cost, honestly, avoid. Any download whatsoever prior to the interview or prior to getting the job, I have a lot of challenges with that. I've seen way too many of these scams up close. So just make sure that you're doing your research before you get into something you can't get out of. I know I've already covered this, but I really want to make sure that it's clear. Bring questions with you. Asking the right questions makes you seem thoughtful, it gives you good vibes. There's this external validation of an awesome creator that's going into 4 questions that you must ask at the end of the interview. And in order to ask those, you have to be prepared to ask them. So you have to know what those questions are. Watch this real quick. I think it's a great little insight into questions that you ask towards the end of the interview. So, some statistics on interview activities. The percent of recruiters said they would reject a candidate who had little knowledge about the company where they're applying. Percent of candidates that report feeling anxious before a job interview. I imagine that's probably most of us. And percent of interviewers said they did not move on with a candidate because of their lack of confidence. It's really interesting to see these things. Take them with a grain of salt, but 47% of recruiters said that they would reject a candidate who had little to no knowledge of the company before applying. 93% of candidates report feeling anxious before an interview. That's pretty much everybody. 40% of interviewers said they did not move on with a candidate because of their lack of confidence. I think it's always interesting to kind of get these different ways of looking at stuff and take it with a grain of salt. It is what it is. So I put together a fairly extensive activity that allows you to do a lot of the company research via a few different prompts and AI tools. I've also provided a ton of different tools in this. So if you are at all concerned that you have not done adequate company research prior to an interview, I got you covered. It's a pretty fast run through, and I give you kind of the ins and outs of how everything works.